This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake talks about bridging the gap between police and minority communities. Commentator Fred Rotondaro says Democrats need to create a brand, one that contrasts with the Republicans. And Bill Press talks with Congressman Charlie Rangel and the Washington Post Clinton Yates about the Eric Garner case. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. With much of the country in an uproar over police brutality, Baltimore's Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake says law enforcement must be sensitive to the demographics of its community. And we say hello to Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, Mayor of Baltimore, the second woman to hold the office. Previously, she was president of the Baltimore City Council, and in addition to serving as mayor, she is secretary of the Democratic National Committee and vice president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today, Your Honor.
Oh, it's certainly my pleasure to have a chance to talk to you.
Yes, and we're happy to have you here, of course. First off, as the mayor of a largely minority population city who is responsible for law and order, what are your thoughts about what occurred in Ferguson, Missouri?
There's so many issues. When you say Ferguson, it means so many different things to different people. I mean, the issue of, police misconduct, the issue of racial disparity in police departments, the issue of having disparate representation where you have a city that's largely, a community that's largely black and no elected black leaders. There's so many different things that come up when you say Ferguson. It means a lot to many people, but at the end of the day, for me, it was a reminder of the work that we still have to do to bridge the gap between communities and the police, and that's the work that we've been doing here in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. Many people have a view of your city, of Baltimore, from the television programs Homicide and The Wire. How are relations between the community and the police in Baltimore? What is the reality?
The reality is that we're improving. I mean, we certainly have our challenges here in Baltimore, but with the police commissioner and me, we are committed to doing whatever we can to bridge that gap. I've been going around the city. I went to every single police district with the police commissioner. We had a conversation with the community, simply asking the question, how can we work better together? And I think that has been helpful. We stay in touch with the community through our community relations councils as well as telephone town halls, so we can make sure that we are staying abreast of the issues that are important to the community as they arise. And it is not something that they're not one-off. It's work that you have to continue to do, and that's my commitment, to put in the time to do the work, to make sure that we that we stay connected, because there's very little that the community can do on its own to make Baltimore a safer place. And the police certainly can't do it alone. The only way that we're going to have sustained change is through a robust partnership, and that's my goal.
Inclusion, which is something that I kind of get the feeling personally that we haven't seen in a place like Ferguson, Missouri.
Definitely. I mean, when it seems that they give the idea of having a diverse police force, it's sort of an afterthought. It can't be. And you have to be sensitive to the demographics of your community. You have to do more if you're trying to really serve a community, to find ways to hire members of that community to help you to have a safer city, and that clearly wasn't done.
Mm-hmm. Now, besides policing and crime, what are some of the key issues facing your city, and how are you handling them?
I think that one of the key issues facing my city outside of public safety is making sure that there are sufficient jobs for Baltimore's families, and that's something I'm very committed to. We are focused on growing jobs in the city and making Baltimore a place where entrepreneurs who are looking for investments, looking for a place to put down roots, consider Baltimore as a place that they want to come. So it's very important for me that I continue to work with small businesses, because we know that they're the backbone of our economy, as well as women and minority-owned businesses. And we've got a lot to show for that work.
We're speaking with Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake here on americasdemocrats.org. You have been outspoken in trying to both increase the population of your city and to do so by welcoming immigrants. Why do you want more people in general, and what do you think immigrants have to offer?
A couple of things, and I'll talk about immigrants first. We're a country that's been founded on the strength of immigrants, of people bringing their culture, their history, and enriching the fabric of our society. So I think certainly the roots of our country, the roots of our state, and the roots of Baltimore City. So I think for me it was common sense that we look back on those roots to plan for the growth of the city. And for me, talking about the growth of the city, I was very committed to having aspirational goals for my city. Baltimore's population has declined over years. We're a city that was almost 1 million people, and now we're about 620 or so, 100,000 people. So we have room for growth. We have the infrastructure to support growth. And I think if we're not focused on growth, we have resigned ourselves to the fact that we're a city in decline. And I don't believe that about Baltimore. I believe that our best days are ahead of us, and I just feel blessed that I get a chance to work to make it better every day.
Mm-hmm. One of the challenges that I'm sure that you face, that a lot of cities where we're trying to regrow or reimage or whatever it is, gentrification. Certainly a tough political issue, is it not?
It is, but the issue of gentrification. Anytime you have a population influx, some people will automatically see it as gentrification, and it does not always have to be that way. We have certain measures in Baltimore that really help that stopgap, that help people who have been in the community and maybe the community has kind of grown up or built up around them. We have things that help keep their home affordable so they can stay in their home and their family can stay in their home. So we have those circuit breakers so their property taxes can't skyrocket from one year to the next. And we have assistance for people with things like the water bills and even with weatherization to keep their energy costs low. So we're doing things to help people who have committed to this community, who have invested in this community, who want to stay in this community. We're giving them some tools so they can do that. That being said, I encourage people to move into our neighborhoods. We have some of the best neighborhoods. I've had the pleasure of traveling all over the world, and Baltimore's neighborhood have a hell of a lot of character. We've got great people who really, love this city. And I think when people come and see an authentic city and a chance to be able to live someplace where they can make a difference, they want to be a part of it. I meet people that have moved here from Philadelphia, from D.C., people from New York every week because they see Baltimore as a city on the move.
Mm-hmm. And great food. All over that town is great food.
I will say it is not the place you want to live if you were on a diet.
That's the truth. Okay, have to do some political type questions too. Mm-hmm. How in the world did Blue State Maryland elect a Republican, Larry Hogan, as governor? As mayor of the state's largest city, how will you be able to work with him?
I am optimistic that we'll be able to have a decent relationship. Every time that the governor-elect has spoken, he talked about the fact that he knows that Maryland's success and the success of Baltimore are linked. And he knows that he can't have an inclusive administration that doesn't include not only Democrats, but include the people from our large jurisdiction. So he says he wants to have a bipartisan administration. He says that he wants to work with us in Baltimore. And I made the commitment. I said I was going to take him at his word and to work with him until he gives me a reason to think that I can't take him at his word. So I remain optimistic.
Good. Now, the outgoing governor, Martin O'Malley, is considering running for president. Would you be likely to support him against Hillary Clinton?
Well, as Secretary for the DNC, there's one thing that we are prohibited from doing as a national officer, and that's participating in the presidential primary as far as campaigning. So I was thrilled to get the opportunity to serve as secretary, understanding that means that I do have to sit on the sidelines. I think the strength of I think even though we suffered some significant losses in the midterm elections, I think we have a strong bench for this upcoming election, and I'm looking forward to getting beyond the primary so I can get back in the presidential politics game.
I had to ask the question, of course.
No,
right?
I get it.
All right. Well, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, Mayor of Baltimore, we appreciate your time with us today here on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to having you back again sometime soon.
Thanks.
All right. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. Regular commentator Fred Rotondaro goes after what he says are the politically idiotic and morally indefensible candidates who opposed President Obama in the midterm elections. And he's talking about Democrats. We'll talk to him about that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Like a dog chewing a bone down to nothing, congressional right-wingers have been gnawing on the so-called scandal of Benghazi for more than 2 years, growling that there's a dark conspiracy inside it involving Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But all of their gnawing and growling has come down to this: nothing. The September 2012 terrorist attack on the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi, Libya, certainly was a night of horror. The American consulate was reduced to rubble and 4 Americans were killed, including Ambassador Chris Stevens. But where others saw the long-standing need to fund better security at these diplomatic hotspots, GOP hotheads sniffed political red meat and jumped on it. They've been holding a nonstop 3-ring circus of hearings and media events ever since, alleging a massive cover-up of Obama-Clinton perfidy. But now comes a report documenting that none of that is true. There was no intelligence failure in the Benghazi attack, no order from on high for a CIA rescue team to stand down, no nixing of a military rescue, and no intentional effort by the White House to mislead the public. The significance of this report is that it is not some whitewash put out by Democrats, but the product of the GOP-controlled House Intelligence Committee. Chairman Mike Rogers, a Michigan Republican, says that his committee's exhaustive 2-year investigation found no wrongdoing by officials in the White House, State Department, CIA, or Benghazi itself. Instead of the loss of life being a product of diabolical political intrigue by U.S. leaders, as the right wing alleges, it was in fact a horrible result of terrorism. This is Jim Hightower saying, so that's that, right? Ha! While the bone of the Benghazi scandal is gone, the right-wingers now have their own party's investigative report to gnaw on. Thus, the zombie of Benghazi lives on.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Fred Rotondaro, one of our regular commentators, has some harsh words for Democrats who ran away from President Obama and says the party needs to establish a new brand. And we say hello to regular commentator Fred Rotondaro, senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, a contributor to the Huffington Post as well as americasdemocrats.org. Also active in the lay Catholic community, especially on social issues. Fred, thanks so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Jim, thank you. I'm delighted to be here as always.
Always nice to speak with you, of course. The president probably put it best. That was quite a shellacking or something to that effect. The problem with the 2014 elections, is it the fact that it was middle-class whites and not the base that abandoned the Democratic Party?
Oh yeah, I think that was a major element. The base of the Democrats, young people, minorities, just didn't come out and vote. Meanwhile, the hardcore, I'll use the term middle-class whites, older people, which I would say are the base, or a large degree of the base of the Republican Party, did come out and vote. And if my memory is correct, 39% of white Americans voted for Democrats. The rest voted for the Republican Party, or in a few cases, minor parties. The Democrats just did a horrible job on getting the base out. And Jim, as you and I have discussed, they did a worse job than usual of telling the voters what they stood for. I think they did a horrible job this time.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we've had conversations over the years about the poor messaging system, and especially right out of the White House. I mean, it starts right up at the top, but all the way down, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. And the number of candidates who literally ran away from President Obama and ran away from their progressive, Democratic, from their progressive past, I thought was both politically idiotic and, very frankly, morally indefensible. Mm-hmm. While Democrats were losing, getting shellacked, it's a word that will go down in history. Progressive ideas were winning. 5 states, 4 of them blue states, voted to increase the minimum wage. The state of Oregon voted to have background checks on guns. And Democratic candidates who had been pushing those things were running away. They were running away from affordable health care, which now has a favorable rating among the 8 or so million Americans who have gotten health care through the ACA. The messaging of the Democrats was very, very sad. Sad.
You can tell the success of the ACA because the Republicans stopped talking about it when it came up to the midterms. Nobody addressed it.
I have been saying since day one, not because I'm wise, not because I'm shrewd, but because I've lived 2-3 months at a time in Europe, and I've seen how a healthcare system that puts healthcare for the people ahead of profits for private companies. I've seen how that system works in Italy and England and France. And I kept saying to myself, when the American people see this, and they move away from the nonsense about death panels and this is socialism and the government is taking over health care, they will realize this is something that is good. This is simply Medicare for all. That's all it is, the affordable health care. And ultimately, I think that's where we're going to go. But ultimately, we need a health care system that says that teenager, that old person, their health is more important than United Health Company making another $100 million in profit this quarter.
Yeah. All right. Now, not so unusual to not have a big turnout for a midterm election, but it is obvious that the Democrats lost a lot of independent votes. They lost a lot of other votes that may have even been part of the base. So what do Democrats have to do to regain trust of the American people?
Well, I think they have to. Put out a brand as to what they are really about. The Democratic Party gave Americans Medicare, gave Americans Social Security. The Democratic Party under Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid have tried to put the brakes on Wall Street. They've tried to cut back on exorbitant tax breaks for the ultra-rich and for corporations. And the Democratic Party is out there pushing for the middle class and pushing for people to try to make it up through the ranks. And they've got to stop running away from this history. They've got to put it out there. The Republican Party voted in 2012 to kill jobs for vets. A Republican lobbyist told me very simply, well, this would have given 20,000 vets jobs, but we couldn't give Obama a victory in an election year. The Republican Party voted in 2010 to filibuster and kill the American Jobs Bill. That Mark Zandi, who was John McCain's chief economic advisor, said would have created about 1.9 million jobs. The Republican Party voted against health benefits for veterans, voted against education benefits. They're killing food programs for younger people. The United States today, Jim, ranks 33rd out of 34 industrial countries in the percentage of kids living in poverty. 1 out of 30 American kids are homeless. The Democratic Party is trying to do something about this, but they're trying to do it in secret. They feel like they're almost ashamed of it. And I think they've got to get away from that. They've got to put out what their brand is. They got to contrast it with what the Republican Party brand is. And when they do that, I think you're going to find an awful lot of Americans saying, yeah, we're being hoodwinked. We're voting against our own interests. But more importantly, Jim, they're voting against the interests of their own kids.
Right.
Republicans are driving this country right into the ground, and they're driving the future of American young people into the ground.
We're speaking with Fred Rotondaro, senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, contributor to the Huffington Post, as well as a regular guest of ours here on americasdemocrats.org. How big of a problem, Fred, is the takeover of so many state governments by Republicans holding the governorship and both legislative houses?
Oh, I think that's going to be a big problem for the Democratic Party, because the states are the breeding grounds for future political leaders, whether you're Republican or Democrat. And if the states are being controlled by Republicans, they're going to be able to pick the best of the lot. And of course, they're going to be able to keep on doing things at the state level, such as voter suppression, which so many people still don't understand. Voter suppression is not just about voter ID. It's also cutting back on the amount of time you can vote on a weekend. It's cutting back on the number of polling machines in minority districts. It's simply making it harder for a lot of people to vote in an election. And, of course, in the Republican states, the people who find it harder to vote are inevitably lean Democratic. And Republican state governors and Republican secretaries of state are simply cutting back on their ability to vote in an easy way, as is guaranteed or as should be guaranteed in the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Do you think progressives should be fighting for their issues on a state-by-state basis, or by focusing on Congress, White House, and the courts?
Well, I think it's got to be on. I think it's got to be on both levels. I'm very, very happy to see that there's a new organization, and it's headed by a good friend of mine, Nick Rathod. Nick was the director of community organization for the Center for American Progress, and he held a similar job under the Obama White House, and now he's pulling together individuals and companies to fight at the state level, and that fight has got to take place there. At the same time, the fight has got to be continued in the Congress and in the courts. One of the interesting things that I think, and I speak as a progressive Catholic, is that the 5 justices on the Supreme Court who vote Republican, who vote conservative, are all Catholics. They all are Catholics. One or two of them, one of them I know rather well, and I would consider ourselves to be friends. I know another to have a drink with. They're good. They're very intelligent people, but they come out of the Roman Catholic faith, and they are as conservative as you can possibly be. And this is where I think the church might now begin to start playing a role that is going to be very, very dissimilar from the role it has played in the last 30 or 40 years.
Well, you've got a pope that's very dissimilar from any pope we've seen in probably a lot longer than that.
Boy, oh boy, is he ever. The Pope, Pope Francis, is the greatest advocate against inequality and poverty in the world today. Probably the greatest advocate against inequality and poverty in the last 30 or 40 years. This is going to be very, very important, I think, in American political circles, because I hold, Jim, and we're slightly off the topic here, but I hold that the American Catholic bishops have, over the last 35 years, been so obsessed, and of course obsessed is the word of Pope Francis, with sexual politics, that they have given a de facto permission to right-wing politicians to do anything they wanted regarding social and economic justice issues. And I think that is going to be coming to a halt under this Pope because he's pushing. He's starting to push very, very strongly. The very first major appointment that in America that Pope Francis has made is the appointment of I say cardinal because he's going to be a cardinal soon, Archbishop Blaise Kupich as the Archbishop of Chicago. And in an interview last week, Archbishop Kupich endorsed the immigration executive order of President Obama. As a matter of fact, he said it didn't go far enough. So here's a man who's not saying, well, I'm not going to do anything to annoy those people on the right who I agree with on abortion. Here's a guy who's saying President Obama needs to bring these immigrant people together, bring immigrants together. And when a man of that stature in the Roman Catholic Church starts saying this, as opposed to backing away from these issues, as so many have done, I think it's going to start making a difference in American political circles, as it should.
Again, we're speaking with Fred Rotondaro, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, contributor to the Huffington Post, as well as a regular guest of ours here on americasdemocrats.org. You weren't too far off topic because we were talking a little bit about social issues, and that leads me into my next question, which do you think that part of the problem is that Democrats and progressives have become the party of social issues and have really forgotten the basic economic and foreign policy issues? A lot of people were talking about the economic message not being there, and that's tough to argue.
Jim, I would so very, very much agree with you on that. I think the Democratic Party has, in a way, taken over some of the role of the Republican Party in pushing what I would say would be cultural issues. Democratic Party has, in some cases, the feeling that the way to appeal to women is to talk about contraception, right to abortion, etc. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. This is the belief of a great number of the vast percentage of American Democrats and certainly of American women. But I also think that the Democratic Party has got to realize that there are an awful lot of women out there that are much less concerned about their right to an abortion as they are to economic issues, as they are to their kids getting a decent education, which in many cases they're not, as they are, very frankly, to their ability to get equal pay to men and to make a decent salary. You know, the majority, I think it's something like 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women. And a lot of these women, awful lot of these women, are heading single families. They need support from the Democratic Party. Now, I got to say this, Jim. The Democratic Party has, in a lot of ways, been giving them support. They're pushing for the minimum wage. They're pushing for equal rights for women. But when they go out there in the airwaves, the only thing they're talking about is the right to contraception, right to an abortion. Once again, a lot of Democratic women say this is very important. It is very important for them. But that's not the only thing that American women are interested in. Democrats have got to broaden their horizon a little bit. They've got to actually start looking at pro-life Democrats, and they do exist out there. And they're being kind of ignored by the Democratic Party, which is, I think, one of the reasons why the Democratic Party does so poorly among white workers. And among the white middle class. To a degree, I think white middle class, white working class look upon the Democrats as being a little bit distant from them. And this is, I think, pretty dumb on the part of the Democratic Party.
Before we let you go, the Republican takeover of the Senate, does it doom any cabinet and Supreme Court nominees President Obama may make?
It could very possibly do that. Yeah, it could. They're in a position where I don't think they're going to stop everything that comes down the pike, but they're in a position where they can simply hold up anything that they feel is really important to them. And at that point, President Obama obviously has to go over their heads and go to the American people. But he's been pretty bad at doing that, unfortunately. So yeah, I think you're unfortunately right on target.
And you got a 5-4 leaning right now going the other way for in the Supreme Court. And that's one that may come up within these next couple of years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've got a couple of elderly justices. Justice Ginsburg, who has had some health problems, just had a heart issue last week. Nothing major. It was, I think, a placement of a stent in there, which is routine, but still. A number of the justices are getting up there in their late 70s, early 80s, and this could become an issue.
Yeah, okay. Fred Rotondaro, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, regular contributor to americasdemocrats.org, also a contributor to the Huffington Post, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Fred, thank you as always for your time. We look forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, and this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, veteran congressman and civil rights advocate Charlie Rangel of New York.
Waiting for that call from Congressman Charlie Rangel here with Clinton Yates from the Washington Post, columnist for the Washington Post. And you are on your way to New York. What are you going to be doing up there?
We're going to be doing a sort of a video montage thing. I'm probably going to be writing about it as well. But just basically, trying to get the vibe of what the black males of New York City feel about, on some level.
Will you be going out to Staten Island? Or
we're sort of in the works on that. We're going to be up there all weekend doing a bunch of different things. But, it's weird because, if you're in my generation, you've heard for years about, all you all do is slacktivism and this hashtag activism and this, that, and the third. And you know what? How about that's not true? These protests showed that, I've said myself on this show that protests are sort of a very old school way of demonstrating anything. But I think when you look at the online movements and when you look at the way these protests have gone about, it's not just showing up at the lawn on the Capitol. Yeah. It's actual disruption of normal activities. I've been, just as a, whatever you want to call me, Nintendo generation, millennial, whatever, I've been very happy to see this level of organization and this level of passion about something that is literally taking lives in our community. We're not talking about something that's a minor annoyance. We're talking about something that's killing people.
Yeah, and as the president has said, it's not just a Ferguson problem. It's not just a Staten Island problem. It's an American problem we've all got to be talking about, and we've seen a lot of leadership on this, and very proud to be joined at this time by one of my favorite Americans and one of my favorite members of Congress for sure, Congressman Charles Rangel, representing the 13th District of New York. Congressman Rangel, always good to have you with us. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. With an introduction like that, it's got to be hard to kick me off the program.
Hey, Charlie, when the clock ticks, we'll get you going here. But let me ask you, first of all, I mean, so what do you think about, what was your reaction to the decision of the grand jury, and what do you think the answer is?
Well, I overheard you guys say that certainly is not a Ferguson, Staten Island problem. The one cancer that we have on this great country of ours is our inability to recognize that racism still exists. And until we acknowledge it, we can't really get rid of it. I have never seen a pictorial video that so displays wrongdoing on the part of something. A half a dozen people are there, 5 of them in uniform, 1 dies, and they say it's a homicide, and we don't know what happened. So it's outrageous that something like this could happen, and we have to demand a grand jury evidence so that people, grand juries all over the country, would know that prosecutors are not there to protect police officers.
Yes, Congressman. Yep. Did we lose you? You know, let's try to get him back. But he is
back on.
Yeah, he is making the point about the releasing the transcript and the records of the grand jury. Has that ever been
never
done before?
happens. I mean, that is a super rarity in the law. I mean, in the the judicial world. If that, to me, look, as much as I think we want to know that, I don't pretend to know nearly enough about law to know what that would do other than really incite a lot of fear and a lot of questions. But for the sake of transparency, it's the way to go. I mean, I don't disagree with it. The congressman referred to the video, and the video that they show on TV, by the way, showing that video over and over has become a sort of a traumatic experience for me on a personal level, knowing what I know now about what's not going to happen. But there's a longer version of that video that shows the before and then the 20 minutes or whatever afterward where they don't administer CPR.
He's lying on the ground.
He's lying on the ground. They're just touching him, handcuffed, crowding his entire space, handcuffed. And they're sort of looking as if they can't believe that this actually happened, but they're still not going to do anything about it. Like, the questions of the humanity come in there.
Just to interrupt you, because we have the congressman back. Sorry for that interruption, Congressman.
Okay, I'm good. I don't know when I broke out, but one thing is that even though I was outraged with the decision, I've been more than pleased that a number of people, white, brown, and all colors, realized this just wasn't an attack on black kids. It was an attack on human beings that should be treated with decency. And I think we take it from there with the Department of Justice, a review of the grand jury. We may get something positive out of this.
Mm-hmm. Congressman, it's Clinton Yates from the Washington Post here. A lot of people don't realize that when these sort of wrongful death suits and all that come against the city, it ends up being taxpayers that pay for this as opposed to the officers involved or the police departments involved. Do you think that if more cops were literally financially on the hook for the mistakes that they make, that some of this stuff would change?
The police officer wrongdoing?
Yeah.
Listen, you bet your life. It's not that there's that many policemen that are sick and take advantage of people because of their lack of power. It's the guys that stand on the side and see this thing happening and don't feel a moral commitment to stop it and to say something about it. One of the greatest obstacles that we have to overcome is this blue wall of silence. Mm-hmm. We had this when I was in the Army. You got in the Marines. But God knows you can't have it when you're dealing with civilians that are powerless. It's not that many sick cops. It's just that they get away with it and they're not penalized. All you have to do is say, hey, you want to be outrageous in terms of dealing with this person? Well, hell, you got to lose your job. You're just going to lose your job. But if you see that there's not going to be any consequences, as we have with grand juries around the country, then what the hell? You take a gamble and allow your emotions to guide you rather than your common sense.
What do you think of the reaction on the part of Mayor de Blasio, Congressman? How's he responding to this, in your opinion?
Oh, my God, the mayor and the president, I mean, they are so emotionally involved in this. I could not see how you could respond better when you're not talking about some kid on the street. You're talking about your own kids. I have to do that with my son. I have to do it with my grandkids. It's a darn shame for Americans to have to treat their kids differently because they don't want to annoy policemen and give them cause to do you harm. No, that's wrong. But I couldn't ask de Blasio to say anything better. And we can do all we want with cameras and training, but until people throughout this country recognizes that every group has been kicked around, and now they're going to have to put themselves in the shoes of whose turn it is here. You know, it hasn't been that long ago that we were picking cotton, and it hasn't been that long ago that people decided we have civil and voting rights. And the fact that we made this remarkable gain doesn't mean that the cancer has been cured. Mm-hmm. Italians have gone through it. Irish have gone through it. Jews continue to go through it. But at least we know that it exists. I think it's outrageous the way Italians are silent about the Sopranos. But that's something that I got my hands filled with my own problems. But if we all come together and say that kids are born without any sense of disliking anyone because of their color and because of the way they speak, and something happens to them, and what happens are human beings, their parents, their friends, and how they're raised, the kids in school. And we have to have a sense that in America, we just can't afford to tolerate it because we, unlike most countries, have that damn Statue of Liberty out there as an invitation that you got to be treated fairly as an American.
And, you know, I really do believe that this time it could be different. I know we were just talking before you joined us, Congressman, that we've always heard this, we got to do something about it. But this time, after Ferguson, after Staten Island, after what we hear about Cleveland, and all these different people coming together, maybe this time it could be different, and we will see some change.
Well, Bill, I really hope so, because to tell you the truth, when I was marching in the South, I cursed every step of the way. I didn't have any confidence that we'd get a Lyndon Johnson and a Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. And so I have to be positive now that people who I never thought would change in life, that it's possible once they see technology has brought incidences that occurred in alleys and in the darkness of night. They've brought it so that everyone can see it, and all you have to say is, that could be my kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
Congressman, we're glad you're still at it, still fighting a good fight. It's so good to have you on the program again this morning. Thanks so much.
Always good being with you, Bill. We go back a long, long way.
We do indeed. Okay. Thanks, Congressman. Happy holidays to you. Thank you.
Best to you.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, Fred Rotondaro, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.